What's going on, everyone? It's time for part 2 of our market update.
Yeah.
I'm here with Damon Cademartori of the Cademartori Group at Fairway Mortgage.
Yeah, good morning. How
Did
you
I say
doing?
that right? That was a mouthful. So.
No, it's perfect.
Cool. I wanted to do a part 2 because there's a lot of confusion and concerns, I guess, with interest rates and sellers markets, buyers markets, all that stuff. So I brought in the expert. So Damon, what's going on with the interest rates?
Yeah, so it's a great question. A lot of confusion out there right now, and rightfully so. A lot of expectations. So basically what you have is two competing things going on. There's no saying, don't fight the Fed. So Wall Street basically comes up with their own idea of what they think the Fed's going to do. And then you have the Fed. And for a while there, Wall Street was pushing to say there's going to be, and you still see it out there in some of the firms, Goldman Sachs, they'll come out with reports, different things like that. And basically they were saying 5 to 6 cuts this year. Okay. That's pretty aggressive because if you look at what the Fed's kind of stated in their information, it's closer to 3. But really, rates had started to pull back, which is what you kind of heard in the media. The rates had kind of topped out about 8%, 8 1/8. And then they dropped down to getting close to 6.625, and then they've kind of popped up. We're just under 7% right now, with about 25% down. Okay. A plus credit on purchase, of course. But looking at that, there was a good chance. I think there was a 80% chance of a Fed cut in March. Okay. That's down to about 49% as of this morning. And then the Fed meets this week on Wednesday. They announced that's pretty much 100% that they're not going to cut the rates. But there's some good, strong market data out there that's showing that the economy was still pretty robust. The GDP came out in the 3s. They're expecting like 2.5. So what does all that mean? Some of it means the Fed could hold rates higher for longer, but it also, as inflation starts to tick down a little bit, it dropped to 2.9%.
Okay.
So we're getting kind of to that 2% number that the Fed wants. That will help to have the Fed to start to pull back a little bit on the interest rate. So for the future, it's hard to tell, right? Who knows? I think personally, probably you might see your first rate cut June. Okay. But that doesn't mean rates won't pull back before that.
Okay. Because they were talking about doing a couple this year, right?
3.
Yeah.
Okay. And I think they're talking about doing 0.75% drops. Okay. Right. Originally they were talking about 5, but they're talking about 3, and it could be 3 to 4. And that would cut you between 3/4 to a point from 5.25 Fed's fund rate. And all of that helps. Because the way the bond market reacts is really what's going to help bring those interest rates down. Will they go back to 3? No. And really, it's not very healthy to be at 3 because then we get that bubble on the real estate side again.
Right, and that's what I was going to say. I think a lot of people, and you probably heard it on your side, people are waiting for it to be in the 3s or 2.5, and that's just not going to happen.
Yeah, and you and I talk about this a lot. The biggest problem out there is you really got to weigh where you're comfortable at, right? So what I mean by that is, so when somebody's looking at a property, right, especially up here where we've got limited inventory, we're still about half of where we should be?
Oh, definitely about half.
Yeah. The problem is as rates pull back, you're going to have a lot of buyers that have been on the sidelines jumping back in. Those buyers are either going to be first-time home buyers, which that makes up about 35% of the real estate market, believe it or not. So first-time home buyer, they've been on the sidelines for a year and a half.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, just obliterated with the affordability, which is the worst affordability, I think, in the history of the United States. As interest rates drop, that'll help. But the problem is affordability is affected also by the price of the home, right? So as you get more people jumping in, I mean, it's simple supply and demand. You would think the house prices will continue to move up, right? Because if you've only got one house on the street and 4 people want it, the seller's going to sell it for it.
And we're not seeing too much of that yet of the rates. And I think some people still think we're in that market where they can price it drastically, and it's just not that market anymore. Yeah,
I think the sellers are definitely a little bit still living about 6 months ago on some of the pricing, but that's where you're seeing the price reductions. Now that doesn't mean the market's going to crash. It just means prices were probably a little bit robust and they needed to come back to reality. Right. But as those rates drop, you could start seeing houses get 2 to 3 offers again. You know, there's a lot of the prices are selling for pretty much at asking right now. So
Right.
that would tell me they would start going for a premium.
Right. So, and like you said, you already kind of hit on it, and I think it's already kind of starting to happen where, you know, buyers are kind of coming out of the weeds. But I think as rates kind of drop more, you know, the buyers are just going to come at it everywhere, and there's going to be more competition for some of these houses.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, really, the only way you're going to get a large influx in inventory is you'll see a lot of new builds. There's quite a bit of new builds that are coming onto the market, but not so much in our area. I mean, you'll see it a lot in PV, but those take time still, and a lot of them are sold pretty quick with the amount of demand and some of the incentives that are being offered by the builders.
Right.
The only really way you're going to get enough inventory out there to absorb that demand is if you get a lot of sellers. And the only way a seller really is going to sell a property that I see right now, the deals that I've been dealing with, and you have as well, is some unfortunate cases. Maybe they have to relocate because of business. Maybe there was a divorce,
Right.
a death in the family, those types of things. Or there's just the house is too small and they're outgrowing it. But really, that's really what's driving it. Because it's hard for somebody to walk away from a 3.25% interest rate, which
Right.
I think 60% of the United States has like a 3.25%, 3.5% or under, something like that. But as those rates start to pull back and they get closer to that amount, it's an easier step for somebody.
That comfortable amount that people can do. And I think, and again, both kind of hit on it of letting people know that those rates that everybody's waiting for aren't coming.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of finding what's comfortable and everything, and they are coming down because we were in the 8s.
Yeah, they've come down. Yeah, so I mean, you've come down probably at least 1% conservatively, maybe 1.125%. So they are coming down. But people, I think, thought they were going to just drop to 5%. And
Right.
you know, that as painful that is, that's not really healthy. I mean, you want it to be a gradual drop and make sense. But I do see it getting to the 5s this year. Where in the 5s, probably closer to the highs. But then there's things we can do. Seller concessions, which we're doing a lot on. Sellers are essentially buying down your interest rate for you.
Yeah, there's a lot of just different options that
A lot of different
you
options.
can do. I mean, we're talking all the time about just different options.
Yep.
You know, some other lenders, you know, don't know about or anything like that. So, which is always super cool. Now, I guess a lot of questions. It is a political year.
Yes, great question.
Do you see that being a factor, kind of?
So you know
yes
what's-
or no? Because some
yeah.
people are saying yes, some people are saying no. It's not really going to do
Yeah,
anything.
you know what? Statistically, believe it or not, elections affect interest rates less times than more. So basically, throughout history, an election has not affected interest rates as much as you want to believe. A lot of people say it's an election year. You know, if it's going to really drop interest rates, those things. It's really technically not the case.
Right.
Now, the world economy, it's different than it was 40, 50 years ago. The United States really powers the world as far as an economic driver.
Mm-hmm.
So it's hard for an economist today to even predict things, to be honest with you. And when you've got government forces kind of, you know, stimulus, those types of things, I mean, it's almost impossible for
To be able to
somebody to
predict
predict
that.
any of
Yeah.
that. So that's a tough one. I would think it would have a small effect,
Okay.
but it's not going to be,
Some kind of drastic.
no.
Yeah, they're gonna first day in office come in and be like, let's.
You know, it's usually not even that. Usually what it is usually the current president will put in different things, like things to maybe help alleviate gas prices, right? Which is all going to alleviate inflation, which would cause the Fed to maybe think about dropping it down.
Right.
You really wouldn't see it in the new president
For at least a year or so.
for a little
right?
bit. You're really going to see it leading up to the election, you know, in
Gotcha.
November. You may see some of that a little bit.
Yeah.
Maybe a little more volatility. I think that's probably more what you're going to see, being super rate sensitive.
Right.
But that one's
I
anybody's
think if
game.
we're kind of already scheduled for those 3 drops and everything like that, hopefully that'll kind of carry us through
Yeah,
you know, that period and stuff like
it'd be
that.
nice if we could pick up maybe every little bit helps, maybe even a fourth and a quarter. If we really start to get some great economic data out there, that really kind of pushes toward what the Fed's looking for. Unfortunately, the Fed wants to see, so not really great economic data, but great economic data for them. So Fed wants to see higher unemployment. I know that sounds crazy, but that's called service inflation. So if you got less people looking for a job, they're going to make more money, right?
Right.
Because an employer's got to pay a premium for it. which means that's wage inflation. And that inflation is a good percentage of inflation when it's looked at as a whole. So that kind of news, as you're seeing more companies with layoffs and those things, believe it or not, that is in favor of rate reduction.
Okay. So everything, kind of what we're saying, I'm just kind of, everything's looking good for us continuing to have some reductions. And kind of finishing off, you always hear the date, marry the house, date the rate.
Yeah.
How do we feel about that? Because
I
don't know how I feel about that expression, but
it's
the kind of, I guess, getting back around to it of just you can't get into this rate now and then refinance later
Yeah,
on.
I think really what you want to look at is, Brian, I tell all my clients this, you got to be comfortable with where you're at today.
Exactly.
A lot of lenders out there will say, oh, don't worry about it, refinance it in 6 months. And they said that a year and a half ago, which would have put somebody in a bad spot.
Agreed.
Personally, I don't agree with that. I say you got to be really comfortable where you're at today. And if it doesn't, this way, if things change or economically it doesn't go the way we're thinking,
You're still in an okay place.
yeah, you're okay. You may not want to be there, but you're okay. Financially, you prepared for it, and you're okay. The idea on getting the property ahead of time before you get the price increases, or if you need to make a change and you're comfortable with it, as comfortable as you can be with the payment, then it makes sense. And then yes, when the rates do drop, which I monitor for clients, I've got a list of clients and I monitor it for them, then hey, we can take a look and see what kind of options, what we can do, what we can play with. But I mean, our rate's going to come down, yes, 100% economically. It's just, if you're waiting for it to come down, hey, I'm going to buy this house in the 6 months, and you're mathematically counting on that from a budget standpoint, I would suggest that's not a good idea.
No, and I 1000% agree, so I'm glad that you said that. So, I guess just kind of finishing it off, recommending anybody that is in the line of kind of asking you questions or checking on it or anything,
100%.
How can people get a hold of you?
Yeah, so the best way to get a hold of me is my cell phone. It's 480-430-8330. I have an office in Stonebridge. We're in Suite 220, so I'm always available. But you can get me any time of the day, call or text, whatever's better for you, and I'd be happy to walk you through. We do it a lot for your clients, kind of almost like a mini budget.
Right, well, and it's great that I think the important thing is a lot of people feel like if they call me, that they're like locked in or anything like that. You're very much just helping answer questions and kind of getting people, the ball started if necessary, but just kind of answering any questions. So, definitely reach out to him. I'm going to put the information in this video for him. And if you need any real estate needs, buying or selling right here in the Prescott area, telephone number is 928-710-4690 or tuckersellsprescott@gmail.com. So,
awesome, that's great. Well, thanks for having me.
Okay, thank you for coming, and until the next one.